How is everybody today on this beautiful day? Isn't it gorgeous out? Nice and warm, nice and clear. My name is Zarita Maddox. I'm the Chief Librarian here at the Toms River Branch. I've been with Ocean County Library for about 11 years. And I'm so excited about this day's program and all of you that have decided to take this beautiful Saturday and come visit us. I think this is an awesome opportunity for us to hear some great things about this town. I'm so excited because 34 years ago, I came to Toms River. And my first job was with Head Start, which was across the street, Ocean Inc. I worked with that when I was in Barnegat. And I remember the library and the Bishop building and just how beautiful it was. And my husband told me all the stories about growing up here and what have you. And I thought to myself, because I grew up in Brooklyn, I don't know anybody from my past. I can't tell you where one classmate is or anything like that. And he knows all his friends from, Little League or whatever they do, their little sports and, his teen years and all of that sort of thing. And I'm thinking that is such an awesome thing to be able to know people all of your lives, to be in a town. And then I saw all the different activities that we do in Toms River and all the festivals and everything. It's like, this is so cool. This is so wonderful. So I'm very excited. When I heard about the program that our Wheeler team had put together, I was so excited because I wanted to know more about Toms River history, Toms River people. I've met some people that have been here like long periods of time and what have you, and it's just been wonderful. So I'm very excited about this program today. I'd like to introduce our Wheeler team that have put this together. Our Wheeler room, for those of you that may not know, is upstairs on the second floor. If you're looking to do your genealogies and get some history, that's the place to go. It's a beautiful room, and it's a wonderful quiet study place if you need that. And our team is Megan, Colleen, and Mary. Our Wheeler team is also part of our Info Services Department, and I see there in the back, we have Elizabeth Couny, who is our head of our reference, and we're so glad that they did this. They had this vision to put this program together. We're very excited about all our panelists on today. We want to say a special thank you to you coming and sharing what you know about Toms River, to talk to us a little bit about what has been. And we really look forward to all that you're bringing to us and sharing with us on this afternoon. We'd like to give you a few things so that you know. We are going to, if you're interested in attending or participating in future programs about local history, I want you to let us know. And there are some interest forms that Megan is going to send out or give out to you. And you certainly can put your names on it and give us your information so we can get back to you. Because one of the things that we did find as we were preparing for this, there were so many people who heard about it and said, oh, I remember, I know, I've been here, and we couldn't fit them all up on the stage. So we'll have some subsequent programs after this one. The other thing is, if you have any questions for the panelists, Colleen is going to give you some index cards, and we want you to jot down your questions as they arise, because at the end of the program, you'll have an opportunity to ask those questions of our panelists. Okay. All right, so while we're passing these out, we want to get right into our program, so I'm going to pass the mic to Don. And we'll take it from there. Oh, you can take that one. All right, thank you so much. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the Couny Hall of the Ocean County Library. An unsolicited testimonial to start things off. I think we all treasure this facility, including this wonderful hall that gives us an opportunity to gather. I'd like to pay tribute to a good friend of mine, the late Jim Mancini, without whom many of the library facilities in Ocean County would not exist. He was a champion of the county library system, and he worked to create partnerships all over this county so that no one who lives here in Ocean County is far from the library and the great resources that it brings to all of us. So Jim, I'm sure you're smiling down today, not only on your town, Long Beach Township, but on the Ocean County Library System. as well. Getting on with the program, I'd like to lay out the format a little bit if I could. We have some prepared questions, kind of general in nature, and we'll see where that takes us. And then we have passed out cards so that if anyone has questions that they would like to put to members of the panel, we'll probably try to reserve about the final half hour of the program this afternoon for that. And I'm delighted to hear that there may be future programs, because as I look out over this audience, I know there are many experiences that none of us up here have shared in the town that we love, but we'd certainly like to hear about them from you during future programs. So, without further ado, I've been asked to generally describe who's on the panel. I don't need the notes, but I'll use them anyway, so I don't stray too far from the truth. On my left, a man who has never been on the left before in his entire life, is Dave Johnson. Dave, I don't know how long I've known you, but it's been quite a while. He's a lifelong resident of Toms River, graduate of Toms River High School over there. He served during combat World War II, came back to his hometown, became a commercial photographer, was a part owner of the Ocean County Sun, and anybody who read the Sun this week knows that it no longer exists. The only place he could have read it was at the Historical Society, because they have some microfilm and some hard copies of it. Next to Dave is Manny Hirschblond, L. Manuel Hirschblond, to be formal, we brought seldom are. He also is a native son of Toms River, graduated from the Toms River schools, served in the Navy in World War II, then became the division manager for Walter Reed. Remember the community down the street I did, because I was a usher there, and the drive-in theaters, etc. Then he became first the clerk and then the clerk administrator for our municipal government, where he did an outstanding job. He's the only member of the panel who has twice been hung because of his participation in the blockhouse fight for 3.5. Some of you may want to suggest after the program that a third hanging might be in order. I hope not. He's been involved in all kinds of organizations, as you might imagine. The fire company, Community Memorial Hospital, Jersey Shore Savings and Loan, County Historical Society, United Methodist Church, Riverside Cemetery Association, Toms River Rotary Club, and in his spare time he's involved with the Toms River Schools Hall of Fame. Bert Diebold is next between Manny and Reverend Maddox. He came here by sailboat, not from England, but from faraway Seaside Park, where his family summered, and he soon found the wisdom of going west, young man. He's a true Renaissance man. He's been involved in everything. Another veteran of the Navy. He's run a blueberry farm, worked as a real estate broker, written books about pound fishing, which I don't think anybody does anymore. I think the last one was in Long Island, if my recollection is correct. But and he's drawn some maps. If anybody knows why the Verdun Monument is at the Wanamaker camp, he's willing to pay a handsome sum for that information, because he's driving himself nuts researching it and can't get to the bottom of the mystery, but I'm confident he will. Like so many of the members of the panel, he's been very active in his community. He works at the hospital as a volunteer. He's a friend of Island Beach State Park. The Forked River Coast Guard Station was untouched by Sandy, he reports. He has been active with the County Historical Society, and last year was honored as the first recipient of the Pauline Miller Lifetime Achievement Award by the Historical Society. Reverend Maddox is a lifelong resident of Ocean County, graduate of Central Regional High School in 1970, and a member of the school's Athletic Hall of Fame, which is not hard to believe looking at Mr. Maddox. It's a picture of fitness that I and others envy. After high school, he attended the C.H. Mason Bible College. He's currently associate pastor in Holy Temple of South Tom River. He also works as a chaplain for the Hospice of New Jersey, and is a recreation counselor at the Ark, and a community chaplain for his hometown, now South Tom River. No one's in trouble, but I'm still seeing Barbara Carlino. I've not been summoned to Mr. Detweiler's office that I know of. I think that's where many of them got to know Barbara. She was a wonderful fixture at the Toms River High School for many years. And her husband Mike was an integral part of the early police department development in our community. She's a lifelong resident here, worked for the Toms River Board of Ed as an administrative secretary for 45 years. She was married to the late Mike Carlino, former deputy chief of the Dover Township Police Department. They were married for 50 years. She's volunteered for the County Historical Society, and although we won't mention her age, she is certainly celebrating by doing crossword puzzles and other things that are less stressful and wondering which kids were coming to be suspended or expelled or chastised or whatever. On her right is Oscar Cradle, who is a 59-year resident of South Toms River, where he's an elected official. Graduated from Toms River High School in 1966, and is currently serving his 6th term as an elected official in South Toms River, which many of you have braved the slings and arrows of our political life have to admire. He is a pastor of St. Thomas AME Church in Jackson. Mary Lou Sutton could very well be our hostess because she grew up here. I mean here. Not just in Toms River, but here. Her home was located where part of this branch is now located. And her father was a doctor, Dr. Sawyer. Some of you remember him. I remember the house being used by Pete Giovanni before he became a judge. And he talked to me often about the fact that the house was going to be sold to become part of the library and all the memories and good feelings he had about that house. Mary Lou, as I said, grew up right on the corner here. Her father was the family doctor, and she got to know a great many of the people who lived here because of that connection. She could look from her bedroom across the street to the courthouse. I think then she could also see the sheriff's house, which you can't see anymore because they're surrounded with modern buildings. She enjoys playing bridge and participating in community organizations such as Friends of the Ocean County Library, the Historical Society, and the hospital. Without further ado, I think we ought to move on to some of the questions now. And if we could start with publisher Johnson. Could you tell us, Dave, how long your family has lived in this area and generally the early recollections that you have? I say generally because The program only runs till 4 o'clock.
Do you want me to go back 100 years?
However far back you go.
Tom's River was my first home. When I came from the hospital, we located on King Street. King Street is between Dayton Avenue and Highway 37. There's an ice cream stand on the corner. For any of you who don't know that. So Tom's River has always been my home, except for the few years that I had to go to the service of this country. And the changes that I've seen here, it's unbelievable. If I had known then what I know now, when I became an adult, I would have purchased a lot of the properties, and I would have had a considerable fortune. And knowing that I would be here today, I was thinking back in the 30s and the 40s, this was really a circus town. I mean, it didn't have a circus atmosphere, but the circus people liked to come to Tom's River. We had circuses on carnivals on Water Street and on Highway 37. And the ice cream stand that I just mentioned at the end of King Street, which is across from the Hess Station, that was all high land. It must have been 12 feet higher than the road level. And of course, it was a 2-lane highway in those days. And as a small kid, it looked like a mountain to me. It was accessible from King Street, and that is where a lot of wild watermelons grew, and we just helped ourselves, although a man in town owned that property. But that was a property that was used for many circuses. And the other day, I was looking in one of these handout newspapers, the Ocean Signal, and because this is 2013, they extract a lot of 1933 news from the local newspapers. And I noticed how Allen Brothers had a circus. I don't remember Allen, but I remember the circuses. And that is one of my fond memories as a young kid. One of my other memories is that I did my share of grass mowing and snow shoveling. And I still do that from time to time. And I have a granddaughter who said, "Why don't you get a kid in the neighborhood to do that for you?" And I said, "Well, I am that kid." So they don't exist like we used to in our day. And but Tom's River used to be thought of as like from 37 to the water, and maybe a couple miles east and a couple miles west. And that was pretty much Tom's River. Pleasant Plains was part of Tom's River, and some people used to send mail to people in Pleasant Plains, and they say, "Pleasant Plains, Tom's River, New Jersey." But the whole town has changed so much. The downtown used to have businesses on both sides of Main Street, Washington Street, and Water Streets. We even had a fish market on Water Street. And I think one of the first big stores to come to Tom's River was in 1953 when W.T. Grant located on Main Street. And then by 1960, they were in the Tom's River Shopping Center, which is where Kohl's is now, or in that particular shopping center. So I think it's fair to say that the boom started in 1960. But I was here for all those years before, and quite a few afterwards.
Thanks very much, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Donald.
Could you give us some of your early history and recollections? Appreciate it.
I was thinking about that, and I think it was in May that I was 9 years old. And I came home from school one afternoon, and my mother and father had gone to Philadelphia. My mother and father had gone to Philadelphia. And my father's office was in our house. There was a nurse there, and there was nothing going on, so I decided to take a little walk down to the river. And on my way back on Alton Street here, right in the middle of the hill, I looked up and it was the Hindenburg. And I said, oh wow, that's the Hindenburg? And I ran on home and I went into my father's office where the nurse was, and I said, I just saw the Hindenburg. She said, you did? I said, yes. So we talked some more, and pretty soon we heard this enormous explosion. We had a big house, but it was trembling like this. And I said, what was that? She said, I have no idea. I've never heard thunder that loud. We never figured out what it was until the next day when we learned that the Hindenburg had exploded.
Thanks very much. Councilman, you want to give it a try?
First of all, thank every library staff for inviting me here. I was telling some of the members of the panel that although I hated history in high school, it's become a passion with me lately, especially local history. My family moved here 59 years ago. I was a child in Virginia, but 59 years ago we came here to the South Toms River, and it was awesome, totally different than it is today. It was just a little section that we live in today. We built a house in '62, we're still there. On the Center Street portion of South Toms River. There was no center homes, no Brook Forest, no Holiday City, and we were free at that time. I was talking to Mr. Bennett that we could get on our bikes and ride anywhere in town without fear of getting hit by a car. Today I'm afraid to let my granddaughter ride down the street without me right behind her. This town has changed a bit, and that's being polite. It's grown up quite a bit, and I'm just thankful that I had the opportunity to be here when it was a small town, when we knew all our neighbors, when we knew the store owners. I can remember going into Ben Carroll's sweet shop. Ben Carroll was a resident of South Toms, of South Toms River. His son, Mickey, still lives on Flint Road there in South Toms River. But I remember going into the sweet shop, getting a 10-cent cherry Coke, going down there with lunch for the 50 cents. This building right here was the Presbyterian Church. Reverend Van Dyke was the pastor. We used to have sock hops in here on Friday night, upstairs in the fellowship hall. I remember quite a few things here. Boy Scouts at the Methodist Church down there. It was on the corner of Hooper and Washington. Troop 26, and I can still remember the troop leaders, Jesse Irons and Haynes Grover were our troop leaders. And we used to walk over from South Toms River. We had no Boy Scout troop there at the time, but because I was raised in the Methodist Church, they connected with us over there and allowed us to come here and join them with the Boy Scouts. I'm going to stop right there because being a preacher and a politician, I can talk all night.
Next, maybe we could have some observations from Manny Hirschhorn. I know that I'm going to listen with great interest, because there's so many people on this panel who know so much more than I do.
I'll be very brief. My mother was born in Tom River, was a member of the choir family, lived up on Main Street. My father came over from Latvia when he was about 16 years old. They got together, and my dad started a haberdashery business on the Main and Washington Street, where the first national bank used to be, what do they call it now? What's that bank? Wells Fargo. Hang around when they need to crash. And then he went there to the theater business, which I became involved in initially. The old Craco Theater, which again is reopened, the little story on here on the corner of the cookie cab. And he started with vaudeville, many acts back in the 20s. We used to catch the acts on the way from New York to Atlantic City or on the way back. Abbott and Costello, for example, paid them $15 for 3 shows. And that's where they started the show, Who's on First? They had to try out here on the Craco Theater stage many years ago. And of course, I came to the ranks of the Tom River High School, or the Tom River school system, graduated in '44, and I'm happy to see a few of my classmates here. Stand up, Tom, Pat. Come on.
I can't sit.
Can't stand up. There's still a few of us left.
Take my time to get up.
But having been born and raised in this town, I started my schooling actually in St. Joe's when it first opened up. I was 9 weeks pregnant when I was born. Doctor would let me go a full day. And Father Walsh, who just come to town, Tom River, was a member of my father's Monday night poker club. And public school wouldn't take me for a half a day, so my dad said one night, Father, my son can't go to school full day. We take him for a half, take him for an hour, send him over. So I got my start at St. Joe's, went there for 3 or 4 years, and moved over to the public school. And a great education, those 4 years, that was tough. The sisters gave me a good start, and I was well behaved when I went to the public school. But my dad always said, son, you want to get back to your town because your town's been good to you. And I tried to do that through belonging to many organizations, giving back some time. And my good wife has let me do that because she sat home with my 2 sons, raising them while I was out chasing fire trucks or whatever. But it's been a good life in Tom River. We're still here, and we don't intend to leave until the good Lord calls us. Thank you.
Bert, could you tell us about the long sail you had from Seaside Park to discover our fair village?
Well, my first visit to Tom's River was in the sneak box. Arlen Conover, whose father was a judge in Tom's River. They lived on Main Street. He asked me to go over for a sailboat ride. He had to inspect his father's house. So we got in the sneak box. It was a 15-foot sneak box, and we sailed up the river. And as we approached the port of Tom's River, the wind died, and so we had to paddle the rest of the way. We got behind Berry's Hardware store on Water Street, and we walked up Main Street, inspected the house, and started back to Seaside Park. That was my first trip here. It thundered and lightning on the way home, and the wind was really blowing hard when we reached Goodluck Point, but we made it back to Seaside Park, a town of 400.
Maddox, please share some of your early experiences here with us, please.
Well, I can't quite go back 100 years. I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am the youngest person on the panel. So everybody knows a lot more than I do, but I remember Tom's River in a very, very good light. It was a place that you could grow up and have fun. There were 3 families that I just like to mention that when we were growing up. The Finkbinders, Clancy's, and Thurgarides. They had basketball courts in their yard. And you could go there anytime and play. Their kids did not have to be playing. You could just go. There would always be a basketball either on the court or by their back door. And we would go and play and have a good time. But they were just very, very nice.
I was sitting here thinking about Tom's River. It kind of reminds me of the Andy Griffin Show because it was laid back and everybody really got along. I remember the community theater. I think we paid 75 cents when I was a kid to go to the theater. And you could always go, because you'd always get 75 cents if you had to pick up bottles and return them and get change like that. I also remember the drive-in theater that we had on 37. It was just a great place to grow up. People interacted well together, and it formed who I was. I mean, I'm from South Tom's River, but Ocean County and Tom's River is the county seat. And so we spent a lot of time in Tom's River, and it kind of formed me and shaped me into the person I am today that really, serves my community and wants to get back. And I think Tom's River helped me to have that mindset because of the way it was when I was a kid.
Thank you very much. I've saved the best for last. Is many of you who had to go to the office at Tom's River High School for one reason or another, whether it was just early dismissal or you had really done something outrageous. But you always saw a smiling, pleasant face there, and my impression was that I knew that I was in for some trouble from Mr. Detweiler, but it was almost worth going to the office because there was always somebody there to make you feel like you were in a good place. Barbara, would you share some of your recollections? I'm sure you have many. But early on in Tom's River with us,
I have a number of recollections, and I go back a long ways. I was born on Robbins Parkway, which is now the parking lot next to Honey Park. I grew up, of course, in Tom's River. Remember the stores and the people. I think everybody you met on the street you knew. And then I went to Tom's River High School, Tom's River Schools, which was ended up being the high school. And when the elementary school was built, I went there in the second grade. I went through to the 8th grade and went to high school back in the old building. And then when I graduated, I was employed by the Board of Education, and I worked as Mr. Detweiler's secretary. I think I was the first full-time secretary that existed, and I went through that school with him until they built High School South, and then I went over there with him until he retired. But I remember so many of the students that went through school. I became friends with. They grew up, went to college or whatever, got married, had children. I saw their children go through high school, and I knew so many of them. And for me, it was a wonderful job. I loved working with the teachers and the students. And I know I get kidded about coming to the office, the students that come to the office. I don't remember the bad ones. So I can't.
there were too many.
Although there were some I know, but Mr. Detweiler was such a good principal and kind to all the students and good to me, I know. But it was a good life, and I've enjoyed every bit of it since I've been here.
Thank you very much. Can we talk about the businesses that were here and the changes that we've all seen, the migration to other parts of our community a little bit? Maybe Manny or Dave or both, or anyone who wants to join in. Dave, you want to give it a shot? You remember all the businesses. You probably sold ads to them 3 or 4 times a week.
Well, thank you. When I see Barbara Tilt, I was going to say Barbara Tilt, she's Carlino. I remember her very well because I was in her boss's office so often in high school. And he's the man for whom they named the football field and stadium. And of course, I forgot to tell you in my opening piece that the WPA under FDR, they built that stadium about 1933. Is that correct, Barbara? Well,
I don't remember.
well, it was 1933 because I was 8 years old and I remember. And Mr. Detweiler, whom I grew very fond of long after I was out of high school, they named the field for him, where Goulding Field became Detweiler Stadium. And but as I look at Barbara, I remember she was the one I always had to go to, and she had a little office outside of his office. Well, his office was little, and her office was much bigger. I'd have to go to her to get the excuse to be able to leave the school premises. And she always used to write BRT on the bottom of that little 3x4-inch note. And down to the sweet shop I'd go along with others, and that was where we congregated when we were off the school grounds. What else did you want, Donald?
What were some of the other businesses that you remember along Main Street? And I think you'll agree that that was sort of the commercial center of our universe in those days. The stores that were there, the bank.
Well, we had, believe it or not, we had 2 A&P stores in this town on the east side of Main Street. One was towards the corner right down here off Washington Street, and the other one was on Lower Main Street. 2 A&Ps. And we had an American stores where Charney's was located. It's lately called Jimmy C's Capone's on Washington Street. And later, after the American stores, well, they didn't fold. They were part of what became Acme Markets. All of you have heard of Acme Markets. And they were on Lower Main Street. But Tom's River had a very diversified business element. And we had banks to go along with it. But this downtown went along the lines of many other downtowns because of the malls in the suburban areas where they offered much more parking. And the Toms River is still a nice town, but it has a lot of downsides. And but I can tell you, it's as good a town to grow up in as any that I know.
Yeah, there are a couple of businesses that are still in operation that go way back to the old regular theater days. And one is J.W. Finley, 137. They were once located in a little, on the side of the Traco Theater lobby right here on Washington Street. The other one was Skip Clark. They were also located in the Traco building on the side. And they're now located, I think, here on Washington Street. And one of my favorite businesses was Berry's Ice Cream, just down from the Traco Theater, where they made homemade ice cream. And you went on a Friday night or Saturday night, now Mary Lou and I were talking about that before. And the ice cream was stick to the roof of your mouth. It was very creamy, homemade stuff. And he moved to Highland Heights. But downtown was the hub of Ocean County. People came to Toms River on Saturday night. You would see people you didn't see except for Saturday night. They would come out every Saturday night and see them in the same place. They would park on Washington Street, greet their neighbors. They would come as far as Tucker, because between here and Tucker it was much of anything. Barnegat, Manahawk, and they were just beginning to grow back then. But the businesses were local. You had Woods Meat Market, Kohler's, who had his own truck, would deliver groceries to anyone in the surrounding areas. Shut-ins, they would pick up and call in their order, and they would deliver the food, meats, whatever, to their homes. And of course, you had the bank, First National Trust Company. Trust Company was down on Water Street, which is now an open space where you come in by the river. We tore all that down and urban renewal. and opened up the street. So we lost a lot of business on Water Street. We had a couple of barber shops down there, and the fish market is, they had a place where they used to play poker somewhere down there. I think the local team of police used to visit once in a while, but I'm into that.
Bert, you want to tell us about some of the milk delivery episodes that you were regaling me with before?
Oh, the airports and Tom's River. I'm constantly researching the Ocean County Historical Society, and we have the Sun newspapers and the New Jersey Courier papers, and they are very, very interesting to read. There were 5 airports in Tom's River. Can you believe that? There was one on Indian Head Road, and another one over at the Bailey McGuire Farm, and 3 airports on Chestnut Street. I want to tell you the story about Alvin Applegate. He's a native of Tom's River, born on Cedar Grove Road, and went to the Cedar Grove Church. He lives in Florida right now, but he would entertain us at the hospital, telling us the stories of the airports of Tom's River and how he would take off with Mr. Walt McGuire, who worked, and his father owned the Bailey Golf Course, and they would fly over the pine lands hunting for deer. Mr. McGuire would shoot the deer, and Alvin would fly the plane at 13 years old. And what they would do is land on Route 72 and go back in and get the deer and bring it to the airplane. Well, Alvin had to stay down there because the deer would just about fit in the front seat. And McGuire would fly back to Tom's River and then load the deer and fly down and get Alvin. Well, one day they were flying around there and they didn't see any deer. And all of a sudden, Walt noted they were running low on gas, so they landed on Route 72 and taxied up to a gas station. The man was an Applegate, and he understood.
Thanks very much. Does anyone else want to try to top that one or talk about any of the businesses that they recall or particularly frequented or missed, or has some perspective on what caused the decline of the downtown?
I think from my standpoint as a young, I guess the youngest of the family, I'm going to say that over and over again. The sweet shop, because that was a real place to gather, and when it left, everybody missed it. But you had Tommy's also on Main Street, and it was a place to hang out. And when we were kids, hanging out wasn't like kids hang out now. It wasn't a lot of craziness going on, but it was a place that we could come together. And of course, they knew your parents, so you couldn't act crazy anyway. That was a good thing about Tom's River. When I was introduced to Mr. Johnson, I met him years ago, but when I was introduced to him today, he said, "Oh, I know your father." Actually, he's my grandfather. But that's the way it was in Tom's River. When they saw you, they knew somebody in your family. So you could, aren't you Lonnie Maddox's son, aren't you? Yes, I am. Okay, I got my eye on it. So you couldn't really, in this area, you couldn't really go berserk because there was always somebody that knew somebody in your family. And unlike today, adults could chastise children, even if they weren't their children. They could say, stop doing a certain thing. If you try that now, children would say a few choice words. But I think for me, the sweet shop is the business that I miss the most.
Thanks very much. Does anyone else want to try any of the businesses? If not, we can move along.
I just want to briefly, I won't take long, One of my most fondest memories is from the Walter Reed Theater. Every Thanksgiving and every Easter, connection with the fire company down there on Water Street. On Thanksgiving, we'd have dinner at the firehouse and come over to the movie theater and watch cartoons for a couple of hours for free. And I remember that mainly we used to do it on Easter also. I couldn't have been anymore, had to be in late 50s. That's the only place I've ever won anything. We had little tickets, you know, like 50-50 type tickets, and I won a big chocolate covered Easter egg, and it made me sick that night. I tried to eat it all. But fond memories of Walter Reed Theater. You know, we could come in there and go in there and enjoy ourselves. And as Larry said, Elder Maddox said, we knew we better be on our P's and Q's, because everybody knew everybody. My father worked at the cleaners right there on Main Street, and word we got back if I acted up. That's one of my fondest memories.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I got to know all the businesses and stores in Toms River. We had a lot of variety of anything you wanted or needed you could get in Toms River. When I was growing up, my parents used to let me go to the movies on Saturday afternoons. So I went to the Traco Theater.
Exactly.
And I went, I guess, every Saturday probably.
Continuous.
And I had to laugh because eventually, I guess I was maybe in the 8th grade, and Mr. Hitchcock, who took the tickets, turned to me one day, and one time when I was there, and he said, "Barbara, I think it's time you paid the adult price."
That was great. Thank you. We had no computers, few televisions, no video games. Who has recollections of what we did to keep ourselves busy? Or do you have any ideas of what you did? You sailed a little bit, and did you manage to keep busy without all these technological improvements?
I don't know, I haven't been able to keep up with it, but maybe
No, not much of a computer person, but I tell you this, that to keep busy, we not only hung out at the sweet shop, but on Sunday afternoons, we would walk to the beach with the circle shop. That's now a car plant, I believe. And in the back room, they had a jukebox. And we didn't have the jukebox wasn't working. We had 3 or 4 fellows in our class. We had a jam session. And we would go there from 1 o'clock to maybe 4 in the afternoon, 4:30. And that's how we would spend our Sunday afternoon. But we would walk, no problem, walk from Toms River. And a lot of our folks lived way out in some of the chicken farms and so forth. They would walk into town, and we'd all gather, walk to the walk home. And I remember one story of the circle shop. At the time was run by a fellow named Steve. He'd just been discharged from the Navy. December the 7th, 1941. We were there that afternoon doing our thing. And Steve said, "Hawaiian Islands, Pearl Harbor. Any of you know where that is?" None of us do, but we soon found out. But he said, "Not to worry. I just spent 30 years in the U.S. Navy. Japan has anything at all like our Navy, and the war will be over in a couple of weeks." Discharged Navy chief. Ha.
Hey, what did you do to keep busy when you were a child without all these gadgets and gizmos? Is there anything you can tell us about? How did you keep yourself busy?
How do you keep busy? How do you keep busy?
How do you keep busy?
As a child in Toms River without all the electronic distractions of today.
I don't follow you, that's the problem. I'm not
All
here.
right. What I'm trying to find out, Nate, is without all of the technology that entertains our young people today, what did the young people from Tom's River in your time do to keep themselves busy? They were playing sports or going up creek or down creek or over to the beach or what?
I think people went to Ortley Beach and over to the boardwalk quite often and keep themselves busy. This is what you're speaking about?
Right.
And I don't know if they went other places or not, but it was always easy to go over the bridge, especially over the original bridge, which Ferd remembers. It was all wood. And it was before the Mathis Bridge was constructed in 1960. And it was clickety-clack, you know. And one thing I wanted to tell you about that bridge is it was in such poor shape that when we were in the newspaper business, I had Mayor Tunney, the senior Mayor Tunney, the grandfather of George Gilmore. I met him on the bridge one day, and he was out there pounding down the plank, you know, for publicity purpose. And I ran across that picture the other day. It's very interesting. But that's what people did. They went to the beach for the most part.
Anybody on this side?
I'd like to say something, trying to think of Mike. But summertimes, right down here on Water Street, South Main, behind the hotel that's there now, it was a beach. And my brothers, two of them were here today, and my sister, we lived at that beach. My mom worked at the hospital from 7 o'clock in the morning. We were there. The bus station was right there behind the beach. They had a lifeguard at the beach, and we stayed down there all day long. Never thought about sitting at home watching TV. I was saying earlier, on our street, we only had one TV on the street anyway, so wasn't in Washington. But that's where we spent our days. Winter times over there in South Tom's River, we had 2 large cranberry bogs, and they would dam them up, and they'd freeze over, and we'd ice skate during the winter. All of our experience were outside. And summer, as soon as we got our daily chores, and we had chores back then, as soon as we got our chores done, we hit the door and we were gone. And our only rule was be back before the lights come on. And we stayed outside and enjoyed a good life. We were always running, ripping and roaring, and having a good time. No store-bought toys. We found our toys on Maple. But it was a good life.
Thank you. Do you remember the winter times here and your ability to not only ice boat, but ice skate or walk or drive your car right across the bed?
Yes, I remember skating on the cranberry bog, but I walked over there. I don't know how, it must have been a mile. I walked back, and my toes felt like they were going to fall. But we did have a close-knit society here, too, because when I go home sometimes, my father would say, well, Mary, my Gestapo told me. We're down in the sweet shop, he said. How did you know that? I don't know.
The crazy person that drove in the river.
Very well. We're all ears. First, going to tell us about
My
the
younger
crazy
days,
person who drove in the river.
The river used to freeze over, and I'm one of those crazy people that used to take his car out there and get going full speed. I always went in at Island Heights and headed east for Seaside Park, and get the car, the Dodge Dart. It was a blue one, and I hated the car. You get going real fast, put on the brakes, and you just kept spinning around. And I drove all the way over to Seaside Park. I also rode the railroad over there, too. I'm not old. But it was great fun on the river doing that.
Can you talk Anybody want to talk a little bit about the railroad? They're willing to take trains practically anywhere you wanted to go, and how they are no more.
The first railroad came to Tom's River. It was a branch of the Central Railroad, Southern Railroad, and it branched off at Lakehurst and came as far as in back of where the post office is today. And they had a turntable there. That's where the original Tom's River station was. It wasn't where it was located later. And they turned the engine around and it went to New York every day and back to Tom's River. And the other railroad, the Pennsylvania Railroad, was built across the bay in 1981. It took them all winter to build it. The trestle going across there. The only thing that concerned people was the drawbridge. The turntable bridge. They didn't think it was wide enough for the boats, and finally they made it a little bit wider. But can you imagine rowing out there twice a day in the dead of winter in a snowstorm to close that bridge so the train could go across the Seaside Park? Because there were people that lived in Seaside Park that went to Philadelphia every day.
Yeah.
Thanks. Manny, do you remember the fire that destroyed that trestle across the bay? I talked with Ricky Couny before he died. Fire? The fire that was destroyed the bridge at Barnegat Pier?
No.
1946, the fire.
That was a forest fire.
Yeah.
It started west of there, ended up into the only thing that stopped was the bay, but the trestles caught fire and ran halfway across the bay.
And am I right that was the end of it? They never rebuilt it?
No,
That was
that was the end of it. Then they used a part of it for a fishing pier, I think by the old Starlight.
Okay, thanks very much. Anyone else have any railroad stories they'd like to regale us with? All right, let's move on then. What about the spiritual growth of our community? I used to drive up Route 9 before it became Route 166, and you'd see 3 church steeples welcoming you to our community. Now I look up and I see the jail welcoming us. I wonder which way you're going here. But the spiritual heart of the town was where the rest of the heart of the town was, I think. And anybody have any observations on how many different faiths are now represented in our community and how the churches are spread far and wide in town?
The Mormons lived in South Tom's River.
Tell us a
The
little
Mormons
bit.
lived in South Tom's River about 1850, and they decided to move west. The people of Tom's River helped them with their wagons, repairing them, and getting them started. That's the only thing I know about the Mormons. There used to be a sign down just as you were entering South Tom's River, put up by the state of New Jersey, but it disappeared. I don't know whatever happened to it. But the Mormons left from here.
I have a little bit more about the Mormons right there on the triangle where Clinton Road, South Main is. They had a church, and at one time they had a graveyard across the street. Some of those bodies were disinterred and taken up to the grave site just past 37. And as you said, in the late 1800s, they heeded the call and went to Salt Lake City, Utah, in the covered wagons to fellowship over there with where their base became over there. But the site was right there where Flint Road and South Main Street come together. I think there was a motorcycle shop there most recently in that space. When I first got here, it was a feed grain. The pop worked there for a little while. Then it became Cossack, built an apartment complex there. But it was right there on that site. Today there's construction and self-storage place there.
Don, there was one other, sort of a black mark in our town many years ago, but there was a group called KKK. And they were out at Riverwood Park, which which is now a recreation building for the township. That's where their headquarters is located. And on certain Saturday nights, they would come to town in their full area with their burning cross. And we lived on Main Street, and I don't know how old I was, but my mother would chase me to the back of the house when they would come down Main Street. She didn't want me to see this. But that's part of our not such good history part.
As I said, we're going to all learn something here today, and I certainly am. What about Tom's River as part of the Great American Experiment? Does anybody have any observations on the experience through the Depression or World War II, or any particular impacts here? Vietnam, civil rights, any of those issues bring memories to anyone? Particular reference to Tom's River? Mayor Johnson?
Donald, I think that this would be appropriate this time. The Depression, when you mentioned Depression, we were poor. No question about it. And that's when they were the early days of Tom's River. But what I wanted to say is that all afternoon today, we've heard the name Tom's River. And it was 70 years ago today, not today, but 70 years ago this October, across the street in front of the courthouse, I got on the bus with many others and we went to Fort Dix. That was the beginning of our Army life. And when we left Fort Dix, we went to Boston Harbor. And I went through all sorts of discomforts when telling people that I was from Tom's River. Tom's River, where is Tom's River? That's in New Jersey. They called it all kinds of names, Tom's Creek, and Tom's this and everything. And I want all of you to know, and most of you are less than age 70, because this is 70 years ago. It's taken 70 years for this town to get to be what it is today. And there isn't anyone in America, in my opinion, that doesn't know where Tom's River is. I mean, Tom's River has become very well known. You walk in the Port Authority in New York City and you ask someone if they know where Tom's River is, they might tell you down to the end you get the bus. But they all know where Tom's River is. And the three things that come to my mind that made Tom's River what it is today: the Seba Pharmaceutical Company, west on 37, the community hospital, and the Garden State Parkway. That is what put Tom's River on the map, in my opinion. The Parkway was in 53, the hospital was in 61, and somewhere in around that time, Seba started because they employed 1,500 people at one time, and it was very good for the economy. And that's what I wanted to say. It's taken 70 years for Tom's River to become what it is today.
Anyone else? Mary Lou, you have any observations on the things that you've lived through here and the impact of World War II or civil rights or Vietnam or?
In World War II, there were a group of us girls, and we got together, and on Saturdays we went around to different houses and collected old metal, iron and stuff, and turned it in, and then we made bandages for World War II, and there were some other things too. I can't think of them right now.
Did you have your ration book with your stamps for gasoline and those kinds of things?
Oh, yes, we had to, it was A and C, I guess C is for gasoline. And you didn't get much gasoline in those days. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you were very careful with your gasoline.
Okay.
Anyone else? Just one other thing about World War II. We had an airplane spotters tower at the north end of the high school stadium. And it was manned by volunteers, 4-hour shifts, 24 hours a day. And it was the beginning of the war, 1941. It opened up. That was for radar and all the sophisticated equipment they have today. And Mark Russell and I opened that spotter station up one afternoon. The people who were to relieve us 4 hours later never showed up, so we spent the next 8, a total of 8 hours. But as an aircraft flew over, you would pick up the phone. They had a direct line to Floyd Bennett Field in New York. And I remember you'd say one, whether it was 2 engine, you'd say 1 by for 2 engines or single. You'd give them the direction the plane was flying, whether it was high or low. And that's how they kept track of the air traffic in this area back in the first beginning days of World War II.
They also had,
I'd like to add to something Manny said about the tower. The tower was much higher than the press booth is over in Goulding Field or Detweiler Stadium. And I too did my shifts, 4-hour shifts with my uncle. And I didn't know it was 1942. I thought maybe it was 1940 because over on the boardwalk they had real black curtains all along the entire length of the boardwalk so that the enemy wouldn't see those lights from the concessions and amusements. And it was a scary time, but I don't hardly remember an airplane flying over on our ship. So I guess
You're probably sleeping.
Either that or you would shift to work. What should we try to preserve of our community? I mean, we can make films and tell people, future generations, what we recall and what happened and the things that happened in our community. But are there places and things that we should be preserving that we're not preserving? I think there are many examples of things that were an important part of our history that are no longer here. Does anybody have any ideas if you had 1 or 2 things about Tom's River that you would want to preserve, what would that be?
I think the main thing that we should preserve is a sense of community, a sense of togetherness. We've seen our community come together in a time of tragedy, 9/11 and things of that nature, but I think that kind of camaraderie should be ongoing. It shouldn't take us a tragedy to bring us together. We should realize that the closer knit we are, the better we're going to be, and the better our children are going to be. Because we're not going to be here forever. I am the youngest one on the panel. I don't forget that I would mention that. But if we're unified, and our children see that we're unified, then when they grow up, they will be unified. Their children will grow up knowing of the unity. When they grow up, they will be unified. And we'll stay that community that can reach out to one another. You know, without a doubt, if I need something, you know, Reverend Cradle is on the panel. I always share this when I preach. I know he's embarrassed. I always share this when I preach and he's in my presence. I worked for Bell Atlantic for 31 years, 10 months, 18 days, and 2.5 hours. Reverend Cradle is the one that got me the job. Not only got me the job, took me to the interview because I didn't have a car. Took me back to the interview again when I didn't have a car. Took me back finally to get the job. Never once did he ask for gas money. He never asked one thing. I'm saying this, he's here, but what I'm saying is this can be the community kind of thing. You know, there used to be a thing where you go to your neighbor and ask for a cup of sugar, or I need 2 eggs to do something. I think if we could keep that sense of community in Tom's River, then Tom's River will always be Tom's River, a place that people know that it's a community of people that love one another.
Is there anyone else who has a building, a place, document document.
I just have a question while you're all talking. When I first moved here in 1983, I heard something about the Huddy Park was named after a Captain Huddy, that ships used to come in down the Toms River. Does anybody know anything about that?
You have to talk to Captain Huddy. He survived 2 hangings to be here today. That's all true, and the park is there. It's a beautiful park. Never been lovelier, in my opinion. I think you'll agree with me on that. And that was a Revolutionary War episode. One of the last conflicts between the British and the Americans in the Revolutionary War. It's been reenacted. There's a film, I'm sure it's available here at the library, about the reenactment of that building, about how the British came in and sacked the town and burned it and took Captain Huddy, who actually was from Monmouth County, but he was here defending Toms River, and he was eventually hanged and created an international incident, and it sort of wrote a rather foul ending to the Revolutionary War in terms of New Jersey. Any other suggestions upon or about places or buildings? We've lost a lot of them. The Methodist church where my bride and I were married is gone. The Riverview Hotel where we had our reception is gone. And I'm sure many of you can go through the list as well. Nobody had lunch today at the Cedar Inn or Citas or Wine River Ranch, that's for sure. But let's move on. Yes.
I just like that one particular building that's close to my heart because I've been around it since I was a kid. One time, South Toms River area was called Birdville. And it received its name from a building on the corner of Center Street and Mill Street where A.P. Grime built birdhouses, sold them throughout the country, the world. He's sold them all over the place. But he built the building that remains today. He had a little chapel in it. He had, I believe, the pipe organ cost $8,000, and this was back in the early 1900s. I dare even guess what it would cost today. But that building, right now, the trucking company owns it. I had the pleasure, the opportunity to go in there a month or so ago. And I don't know who was more impressed with the building, myself or the guy that owned the trucking company. He said, and he promised me that he would not touch the building. He would use the parking lot to park the trucks, but he wanted to preserve the building. He even talked about restoring the building and allowing South Toms River to use it as a museum. As I said, as a kid, I played on it. We made up all kinds of stories of what it was, not knowing what it was, till I got older and started researching and found out that it was A.P. Grime's house. He had a workshop there. One of our first borough meetings was held there. Consequently, quite a few meetings was held there. He was on the first council for South Toms River back in 1927. And he served as South Toms River's first Justice of the Peace. And I'd like to say something. I don't know how true this story is, but I read it in a couple different places that Mr. Grime, A.P. Grime, in order to see what kind of bird houses the birds preferred, he lived in a tree for a little while on his property. And like I said, I've read it in a couple different places, and he believed in building rustic bird houses. In a couple of the articles I had, he states that if you put a rustic bird house next to a painted bird house, the bird would pick the rustic over the painted every time.
I'd like to ask you now what your reaction was when the Garden State Parkway opened and the growth genie came out with a bottle, and all of a sudden, our sleepy little community started having subdivisions built all over the place, and needs for more schools, and all of the other requirements of growth. And did you have any particular sentiment about the growth that followed the opening of the Parkway and the availability of cheap housing here, and people could still commute back north to their jobs? Did you look forward to the growth of the community, or kind of feel like it was going to change?
Well, when we wanted anything big that we were going to buy, we went to Philadelphia. But with the Parkway, we could get on and go shopping in New York just as quickly. I think it was very beneficial.
Thank you.
When I grew up, my parents moved from down Robbins Parkway up on the Lakers Road. And when the Garden State Parkway was going to be put through, our house was right in the middle. And we had to either have it torn down or move it. And my mother didn't want to live on the other side of the parkway because she walked everywhere. And we decided that the best thing to do was to have the house moved. So we had a company, my architect, I think the name is Arthur Luigi. And we had the house moved down the Lakers Road, up a hill, and over on property that we bought at that time, and had the house reestablished there. So we weren't too happy about the Garden State Parkway. It took away a lot of my play area. We had a wooded backyard, and it was a good place. We were right across from the creek. Used to swim in the creek all the time. However, it was progress, and that was about all we could do about it.
Anyone down here have any reaction to the growth spurt? Imagine it was pretty good for business, eh?
You want me to talk?
I've never seen Ben Johnson pass up the opportunity. So we're I'm
flabbergasted. Never lost a word. But the Parkway didn't open up the entire area, whether it was good or bad. We were a little town with about 7,000 or 8,000 people, not counting the chickens and the pigs and the hogs. But when it opened up, our population grew. And Dover Township, or Tom's River, as we know it then, became the township as we know it today, of over 100,000 people. It opened up not only this area, but everything south and areas to the north. So, and we're a bedroom community because of the Garden State Parkway. When I say bedroom community, most of the people don't work in the township, they commute. And if you see that parkway, starting at 4:30 in the morning, it's busy. Everything's going north. Don't get caught in it. Go down to the bus terminal. Every bus that leaves here at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:15, 4:30, they're full. Same way in the evening coming back. So that's what happened with the park.
Thanks, Benny. Anyone else want to weigh in? If you had your druthers, what would you want your children and your grandchildren to know first and foremost about Tom's River? Whether they're going to stay here or go on to college and move somewhere else, but what are the really important lessons of growing up here, the values that you've learned here? Anybody have any input on that? That one, oh, all right.
I'd just like to say very briefly what Matt said. The sense of community is one of the things I wrote down for what we'd like to pass on, what I'd like to pass on. That sense of community that has been here for 59 years that I've been here. And one important thing, as we've stated quite a few times, that if you did something wrong any part of town, because we all knew each other, your parents would find out. But in the same sense, the people in the town never hesitated to give you a pat on the back when you did something right, to congratulate you, to support you. One thing I remember, I did not know Sergeant Colino was your husband. Sergeant Colino? Sergeant Colino, Mike Colino. I'll never forget a night on Washington and Main, right where the Wells Fargo is, Friday night before a football game. There's about 10 of us in the car. I happened to be driving an old 56 Ford, and he got out and saw the car coming down the road, got out in the middle of the road and said, "What, like that, stop. What are you guys doing? You know you have a game tomorrow morning." He says, "Oscar, take each and every one of them home. I'm going to come by your house to make sure you're home. And you better win tomorrow."
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm ready to speak now. Yes, I did wake up, Manny. When I heard you ask what we should teach our young people today about Tom's River and all that, I'm not the PR man for the library, but I would say that the library has a trove of pictorial material and other data that kids could research simply by going to the library or online. TheOceanCountyLibrary.org is the address. And the library is applauded. But it's the truth. They have much pictorial material, and recently, well, I say it was about 3 months or so ago, they had an exhibit, a pictorial exhibit about the bicentennial of Dover Township, which is now Tom's River Township. And that was the bicentennial of the town. And I understand that 5 years from now it will be the centennial, whatever it is. 1767, 2067, or no, it won't be 2067. I forget, but the town is planning something for 5 years from now to celebrate the town, what we did back in 1967. And Mr. Manny Hirschbond here, he was one of the Revolutionary War characters in the pictures. And I just thought I would mention that. Thank you.
Am I right that a part of a sense of community involves being able to exchange information? And maybe someone could weigh in on whether the loss of things like the Courier and the Davis Ocean County Sun and the Daily Observer and the various other newspapers has impeded our ability to communicate, know what's going on in the community, or have Facebook and Twitter and the like more or less replace them. Does anybody have a sense of whether you miss the newspapers or are glad they're gone?
I definitely would like to speak on that. I'll never forget, I graduated high school in '66 and I went to college in Virginia. I made sure I kept a subscription to the Sun. And it came to me on a daily basis down there in Virginia. And I understand with the internet now, most of the people don't read the papers, but I miss that local personal touch that the Sun and the Courier offered to Tom's River area.
I just want to piggyback on what Reverend Green said. He said he graduated in 1966. I graduated in 1970.
Does that make you the youngest member of the
about 5 newspapers a day, but it's something about local news that I miss. Those papers, you would read them and you would find out what was happening in the community, and you can't get that on Facebook. I mean, you just can't get those kind of things. So it is something that we've lost. I don't know if it can be restored, it may be gone, but there's something about the printed word, especially in a local sense, that keeps you involved with your community.
Thank you. Does the former publisher have anything to volunteer on this subject?
I'd like to say that for those of you sitting in this audience that don't know about our panel director here, Don Bennett, his father was among the first that I remember as a superintendent of schools when the schools really started taking off around here, and a finer man we never had. His name was John Bennett.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nate. It's about time for questions if we have any on cards. Does anyone have a question that they have written out that we might give our attention to? They're being collected right now as we speak. If there aren't enough questions, we're going to have a test later. We need more questions. Okay.
It's not really a question. I have sort of a hurrah.
A hurrah?
Hurrah. My husband retired from the Army about 10, 15 years ago. We decided to move to Toms River because of the camaraderie, the atmosphere of Toms River, the way that people like each other and talk to each other. You're not strangers. And I'd like to say, hurrah. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, if we can see what we have here. I can read your writing. Okay. What was on the corner of Route 166 and Route 37 and across from Pizza King? Bob Snyder's gas station.
What was that?
Bob Snyder's gas station.
Esso station.
Esso? That made it doubly rare. Is Doc Russo's house still standing? The consensus is yes.
Yes, it is. Where? Main corner of Dayton, Maine. And Maine.
Corner of Dayton and Maine.
Across from the funeral home. Oh, okay. It's on the corner there. That's two-story house.
All right. What are the old names that established Toms River? I am born at Dr. Russo's Maternity Hospital in 1957. My mom, Willie Smith, was born on Dayton Avenue, 95, can't believe it. Gladys Smith, Horace Smith, and Dot Smith. Some of the old names, many, here are the historic, the old names that settled our fine community.
People who were born there?
The actual founders. I know that's probably a year or two before you were born.
I know Dr. Russo's Maternity Hospital on Main Street. That's where there's some professional offices there now. My two sons were born there. And it was there for quite a while.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else have a longer memory than that about the founders? You had read this.
The hospital where Mr. Hirschblom's two sons were born was Seward Avenue, dead end, facing east, and I guess it's still there.
I'm told it isn't.
I don't know, maybe it's that. I thought it was still there.
Apartments on there now.
Once upon a time was the state police headquarters.
Okay. Who here remembers the state police barracks in Tom's River before it went out on the parkway? You do? Want to tell us a little bit about it?
I can't tell you anything about it, I just remember that we had it here.
Wasn't it out at Lakehurst Road?
Lakehurst Road.
That I can't remember, I'm sorry.
All right. Yes.
My father was a trooper, and my mother used to pick him up by pulling right around in that front way where Dr. Russo's office was, to pick him up. And that's when they were stationed there.
Super. Super. Now we have them out on the parkway, but we have our own police department. We all remember when Brick had none, they were relying on the state police at Marlton to do all their police.
Prior to that, they were in Bricktown on the old duck farm when Bricktown didn't have police and they only had troopers.
Yeah. That's all right, let's see who else. What is the problem with downtown business? Rent? Manasquan has a good downtown business area.
We used to do.
We could probably spend the rest of the week on that one. Matt, you've done a lot to try to fix that with the urban renewal and all that. Do you have any perspective on what can be done other than improve the general economy, which I don't think we have much control over?
No, the downtown Tom's River has become sort of a professional area because of the courthouse, the attorney offices, and the restaurants do serve the folks who work at the courthouse and town hall. But with the advent of the Ocean County Mall and a few other strip malls around, the downtown is sort of boxed in because of parking, number one. Of course, the library brings a lot of people to the downtown area. And at one time, it was the desire of the town fathers to keep police headquarters downtown, but that was not such a good idea either because of the traffic situation. But the fact that the library is here, if you ever come downtown, you'll see that parking garage in the back is full. Almost every day, people coming to the library, even in the evenings, you come downtown. But there is what I understand called the BID in downtown Tom's River, and the Chamber of Commerce type of organization. And I really don't know how good they're doing, but I think they're trying.
Thanks. Anyone else want to weigh in on what can be done to resuscitate Tom's River, the downtown business district? Is it eventually just going to become an office center as opposed to retail? Most of the retail's gone already. No? All right. Why is one of the streets off Main Street named Historic? Anybody know?
Well, because a lot of the old houses, it hasn't been, or that are there long time ago, are still there.
Okay. My answer was going to be that someone who lived on that street knew somebody in the county sign shop. I like your answer better.
Don, there was one other business I forgot to mention, still in the downtown area, been there for many years, that's Harris's Department Store. Started with the grandfather, and Sydney, now Glenn, 3 generations, and still there.
I just wonder if we could name off some of the stores going, we used to do this as a whatever game when we were working in the courthouse, naming every business all the way up and down the street. I didn't hear priest names today.
Well, how about I bring you a microphone and you can name them?
Yes, there were. Phillips Shoe Store.
Yep.
I can't do them all, but there's, naturally, everybody has mentioned the sweet shop. There was another one at the other end, Candyland. The Marion Inn, Central House, I haven't heard mentioned. Mr. Berry's store, partner store, there was a bank next to that, and I don't remember the name of it.
Trust, that was a trust company.
And
We had, yes, Kohler's Market, we had Helene Lawrence's jewelry store, we had Lee's fabric shop. We used to see how many we could remember, and there's a lot of people here that don't remember.
Woolworth.
Yeah. Halligan's store, and I'm trying to think of the woman that worked there for forever and ever. The barber shops downtown. Jones City barber shop, and I could go on and on. So could everybody.
C&W toy shop.
All right. Get extra credit. We have some late blooming questions here. Do you remember the church behind us, Dunkin' Donuts?
Presbyterian Church.
That's right.
Presbyterian Church. Consensus?
St. Joseph's on Hoover Avenue.
Were tolls originally for the parkway only until it was paid for? Anybody on the panel have any insight on that? Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Mr. Bennett.
Yes, sir.
There is one thing that could temporarily help out the area. Excuse me. The Java Joint has been vacant. That's the coffee and restaurant that's on the intersection of Washington Street and Route 166, known as Main Street. If somebody suggested it, it's not my suggestion. It was mentioned by a hired supervisor for the downtown Toms River business organization to turn it into a food court where you would divide that large store that's just a closed up eyesore for about 3 or 4 years now. Seems to be a waste of real estate to set it up, even if it's only temporary, until Toms River Township comes up with a master plan to set it up to be an area where there will be 4 separate small fast food businesses.
Okay.
Now, it's not my idea, but I think it's a good idea. I have it there. We need more eating places in this immediate area.
Thank you. Thank you. What about the tolls on the parkway? Were they originally there to just pay for it, or was it?
Yes.
They're still there. How many times have we paid for it? What about the coast is clear signals during the Second World War when the blackout was lifted for some of the business over on the beach? Manny, do you have any recall of the coast is clear signal being sounded when you?
We had the air raid siren, which was at the old gas plant, the steam whistle, and that used to signal for an air raid or blackout in the evening.
And for those of us who don't know or recall, where was that plant located?
Down by the bus terminal. There were 2 big gas tanks down there. Used to rise and fall with the size of whatever was inside the plant. That's where they made the gas locally. They used coke, and they had the steam whistle in the shop, and that's what they would blow. They also used it for a fire alarm as well.
Okay, thanks, Manny. The ration books were just about covered everything. Mary Lou, didn't they? The ration books during World War II were for gas, and you had to be careful on what you did with metal and rubber and everything that could be used in the war effort. Isn't that so?
That's true.
Okay. All right. That was mercifully brief. I have a plug here while we're talking about the vanishing media. Some of you are probably familiar with the Ocean Signal, which began as the Riverside Signal, but now has extended its reach. It's an interesting paper, comes out twice a month, every 2 weeks, and I think it's worth your investment and time. And they're also on the internet. I think they have an online edition. And I wish them good luck, because some of us who weathered all those storms, like Publisher Johnson and I, know that it's a tough road to hoe in the best of times. Let's see what else. Does anyone remember the old Silverton hardware store at Hooper and Kettle Creek Road? Not everyone, but some. All right.
Doug Doolittle.
Pardon?
Doug Doolittle owned it, and he had a post office in there.
A post office in there? All right. There used to be a large wooden sign at Fisher and Bay telling about pirates, 1920s liquor, and facts about the Toms River area called Shelter Cove. It was taken down back in the late 1960s or early 70s when the area was expanded. Why doesn't the town have more signs about the various areas' historic background? Anybody got a guess on that one? You know, maybe somebody here would like to comment on why we changed the names of some things. We could start with Mosquito Cove. Does anybody know where Mosquito Cove went?
It's now called Silver Bay.
And why did we do that? Anybody know why we changed the name of Mosquito Cove? You mean people didn't want to come and live in a place where had mosquitoes? And what about the Long Swamp Stream? Huh? It's Brookside now, isn't it?
Long Swamp was a very big cranberry bog. It ran all the way from Hooper Avenue, all the way across to Washington Street. And when Seabuck Ivy started their development back in there, they changed the name from Long Swamp to Brookside Drive. Cranberries were very important in Toms River, also the harvesting of huckleberries. The amount was shipped to New York, the huckleberries especially, every day by schooner and sloop from the port of Toms River.
Thanks. Does anyone remember Shelter Cove before the 1950s? And what does anybody remember about it? Was the beach created by dredging, or was the beach just there, or who knows anything about the history of Shelter Cove? Shelter Cove. Shelter. Well,
the township put a beach in the early 60s. Bathing beach, that was one of the township's many beaches at the time. I think it's still there, still operating. But before that, I don't remember. It was just a big piece of property.
Wasn't there a sawhorse there in Revolutionary time?
Somewhere in that area.
Pauline Miller had written.
That was where the original Huddy Park, there's a big monument there, blockhouse was at Shelter Cove.
No, not down there.
Oh, there's a monument that came from Huddy Park at Shelter Cove?
There's a monument there.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions?
Don,
Yes.
may I have the floor just for a moment? Before we close, I would like to recognize probably the oldest living resident, long-living resident in the town, Al McDaniel. Young Al, would you have your dad and mom stand up? I don't know what birthday he just made. Young Al, would you let me know, please?
It was 100 in December.
The reason I came today was because I want to make sure what I said was true. Because they lived across the street from me on Main Street when I was growing up. And now they live out on the west side of town where I also live. Not too far from there. Al, the best of luck and good health.
You've got to get a better machine to talk on. Your voice is kind of muffled.
That's because I'm catching up with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Don, I just wonder if you could ask how many people can remember, because we had a town that had wonderful doctors in it. And we've heard the name one, but I know many of the others can name off about 10 doctors that we had here forever. And I wonder if they know the name of
10 doctors? Why don't we let someone with a particular insight on that start us off? And can you name some of the doctors that were active in the community when you were a young person growing up here?
Well, my father, Dr. Sawyer, and then there was a Dr. Disbrow.
Oh, yeah.
And, who else? Dr. Rousseau. Who else?
Dr.
Jaggers. And Corrigan. Dr. Corrigan.
Dr. Garland.
Dr. Mitchell. Yes.
Dr. Mitchell?
Yes, Dr. Mitchell.
Garland?
Dr. Gartland.
Did you say Corrigan?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Dr. Taylor. Who else?
Dr. Brick.
Anderson?
Dr. Berger. Dr. Berger.
Dr. Russo.
Dr. Russo.
Did you say Pecora?
We did.
Oh, and Dr. Pecora. Yes.
Anyone have any that we omitted? While we're in the medical field,
And they made house calls.
while we're in the medical field, several of you have been involved in the creation of Community Memorial Hospital, now Community Medical Center. And does anybody have any particular recollections of the various twigs and the fundraising operations and all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into creating that hospital? All 50 beds of it?
I remember also many twigs at that hospital. They contributed greatly to making it what it is today. Many
I have one further comment on all the twigs. When they built the hospital, it was 50 beds to start with, and they forgot to put one wing on the hospital. That was for all the alcoholics because of all the parties they had on Saturday nights to raise funds to build the hospital.
Anyone else have any recollections of helping to build our hospital? And my having it grown. Yes, young lady.
I didn't like it when they built it. Nice when they built it.
Before the Ocean County Mall was built, I remember it all being wooded. Across the street, wasn't there a little candy?
On the corner, there was a delicatessen, and I know that a lot of phone guys congregated there to have our coffee in the morning. It was a great place, and we hated when the mall came in because they tore it down.
Now, was that on
It was on the other side. It would have been the northwest corner.
Is that Gatch's store?
I guess that was the name. I'm the youngest on the panel, so I don't remember.
I think we're close to our deadline here, and if anyone has anything else that they'd like to bring before the panel, we'll be happy to do our best. Yes, ma'am?
I've always wondered what the oldest houses in Tom's River are exactly. When I walk around downtown, and I guess I really haven't looked it up very much, but if any of you have any idea. I understand the British burned all the really old ones, so what's the...
What is it? The
oldest houses.
The oldest houses?
Yeah.
Some of them have signs on them, but I know some of us worked years and years ago to try to get some of them, like the Bishop House, which was on the Riverview Point, saved, but Mott Place, and I could go on the Gavis Mansion, but with little success. I think that's a good idea, and if there's anyone here from the local government, maybe they would want to undertake that, to identify and put either something together in writing or on the internet, or have some signs created so that all of the historic places in the town are at least identified. Anybody else have any input on that? Was that ever done to your knowledge, Mr. Park Administrator?
Yes, sir. The Dover Township has a Dover Township Historic Preservation Commission, which Hal Unger, and I see him in the audience, he's a member of, and I'm also a member of, and it's chaired by Mark Mutter, the present township clerk, and also township historian. And they have put on certain buildings in town plaques noting their dates. And off the top of my head, I just can't remember where they were.
So maybe we could introduce more people to the county sign shop. Get the signs made bigger, like they have on Dover Street. Isn't it historic Dover Street, the one?
I will take that up next meeting with Mr. Mark.
All right, thanks. Anything else come before the panel? Seeing none, motion's in order.